Of Arirang News, I'm Mark Broom. Let's start by taking a look at the day's headlines. With the North Korea-US summit in Hanoi just 13 days away, the North and Vietnam vow to develop their traditional bilateral friendship. They also finalised coordination on the details of Kim Jong-un's visit to the Southeast Asian nation. North Korea is named among some 24 countries on the EU's tentative blacklist to protect the bloc against money laundering and terrorism financing threats. Plus, high-stakes trade talks are set to start in Beijing as the March 1st deadline looms for the US and China to strike a deal to end their trade spat. So there are now less than 2 weeks left until the leaders of North Korea and the US sit down for their hugely anticipated summit in Hanoi. And it looks like the details of Kim Jong-un's visit to Vietnam have been finalized now. It also looks likely that Kim will be traveling to Hanoi on a state visit. Our Kim Hyo-sun starts us off.
Vietnamese Foreign Minister Pham Binh Minh met with his North Korean counterpart Lee Yong-ho on Wednesday on the second day of his three-day trip to Pyongyang. They vowed to develop the friendly ties between their nations that was built by the North's founding leader Kim Il-sung and former Vietnamese President Ho Chi Minh. According to North Korea's state-run media, they also shared views on international issues of mutual interest.
The meeting was carried out in a very friendly ambience.
The top diplomats are said to have finalized coordination on the details of Kim Jong-un's visit to Hanoi for his second summit with U.S. President Donald Trump later this month. It also looks likely Kim will be visiting Vietnam as a guest of the Vietnamese state, which means the leaders of North Korea and Vietnam will come face-to-face for the first time in 55 years. Pundits also say Kim Jong-un could tour Vietnam's infrastructure to benchmark the Southeast Asian countries' economic development. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
Seoul and Washington's top diplomats will meet in Poland on Thursday ahead of the second North Korea-US summit scheduled, as we just heard, for late February. In Vietnam, South Korean Foreign Minister Kang and US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will meet in Warsaw on the sidelines of a two-day ministerial summit on peace and security in the Middle East. Kang says the key agenda will be to lay the groundwork for the second Kim-Trump summit, as well as evaluating US Special Representative for North Korea Stephen Biegun's recent visit to Pyongyang. Kang will also propose areas South Korea can contribute to for another successful summit and to let the US know of the outline of the corresponding measures South Korea expects from Washington. The European Union has disclosed its tentative blacklist of countries that pose a threat because of loose controls on terrorism financing and money laundering. This list, consisting of 23 nations, includes North Korea, Iran, Syria and Saudi Arabia. The European Commission says the list is aimed at protecting the EU's financial system from the risks posed by these nations and to crack down on money laundering. The list will be finalised following the endorsement of all 28 EU member states and the European Parliament. US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has told a group of visiting South Korean officials that the intention of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is to demilitarize South Korea rather than denuclearize his own regime. Meeting with South Korean parliamentary leaders led by National Assembly Speaker Moon Hee-sang in Washington on Wednesday, Pelosi also stressed it's time for the North to put its words into action. She added that she's hopeful rather than optimistic about the South Korean people's expectations to establish lasting peace on the Korean peninsula. Now, with President Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un set to meet within the next couple of weeks, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is calling for a summit of his own with North Korea's leader. Abe's comments come as reports are emerging out of Tokyo that Japanese diplomats have assessed that the regime's denuclearization will not happen overnight, although that is a widespread opinion among many. Oh Jung-hee reports.
After President Trump meets with Kim Jong-un, the Japanese Prime Minister says it'll be his turn. At a meeting in Parliament on Tuesday, Shinzo Abe said situations surrounding North Korea have been changing dramatically since the Singapore summit, and that he thinks it's important that he be next to meet the North Korean leader face to face. Prime Minister Abe said he would try to break through the mutual mistrust and work to resolve the nuclear and missile issues, as well as the North's abductions of Japanese citizens in the 1970s and 80s. It appears the Abe administration's tone towards North Korea has softened a great deal compared to last year, and the Japanese media are taking note of that. Last year, around the first Kim-Trump summit, Abe stressed pressuring the North into complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization. But in his annual policy speech to Parliament earlier this year, the Prime Minister never mentioned pressuring the North. Instead, he said he'll work closely with the U.S. and South Korea and aim to ultimately normalize diplomatic ties with Pyongyang. According to the Tokyo Shimbun, senior Japanese diplomats have recently said North Korea's denuclearization cannot be done all at once. Watchers believe that the change in tone comes amid criticism of Tokyo for allowing itself to be, quote, bypassed in recent developments surrounding the Korean peninsula. Japanese media are also saying Tokyo has backed off in terms of its demands, considering America's willingness to move with the North in phases. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
South Korea's presidential office has ruled out the possibility of sharply increasing the country's contribution toward the stationing of American soldiers on the peninsula. Wednesday's statement came a matter of hours after US President Donald Trump insisted Seoul stump up more cash for the US troop presence in the years going forward. Our correspondent at the top office, Shin Se-min, reports.
Not an established fact, says South Korea's presidential office, speaking on the new defense cost-sharing deal agreed by Seoul and Washington. The Blue House spokesperson on Wednesday said the allies may agree to keep the deal at the current level after reviewing the need for an increase, and that Seoul hopes Washington does not consider another hike as an established fact, and also ruled out the possibility of sharply boosting Seoul's contribution toward the stationing of American troops on the peninsula. He added that the allies set the duration of their agreement to 1 year, but that deadline can be extended by another 12 months if both sides agree, apparently dismissing the possibility of an imminent increase. And South Korea's top diplomat also weighed in on the issue.
The amount we had agreed upon stands at $920 million. We will have to look into the background of where President Trump pulled that figure from, but we are sure of the contents the two sides have agreed.
Such an adamant dismissal comes only hours after remarks from the U.S. President Donald Trump, claiming Korea had agreed to pay an additional $500 million as part of its burden sharing for the U.S. forces in Korea.
They were paying about $500 million for $5 billion worth of protection, and we have to do better than that. So they've agreed to pay $500 million more, and over the years it'll start going up.
The agreement made by the two allies diplomats shows that Seoul's share will go up to some $920 million, or some 8.2% from the original $850 million. And despite such a clash over the interpretation of the defense agreement, pressure from Washington on raising Seoul's share of the defense costs looks to continue, with the U.S. president already claiming the need to raise the price tag even before this week's agreement comes into effect. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, with the March 1st deadline looming to thrash out a trade deal between the world's two biggest economic powerhouses, the US and China are set to sit down for last-minute negotiations in Beijing over the next couple of days. Will they be able to strike a deal and bring some much-needed stability back to the global economy? Lee Seung-jae reports.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin arrived in China a few days ahead of his high-level meetings with Chinese officials in Beijing, sounding optimistic a deal that satisfies both sides will be reached by the March 1st deadline. With negotiations kicking off Thursday, Mnuchin will be joined by U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer, as well as David Malpass, President Trump's pick to lead the World Bank. China's delegation will be led by Vice Premier Liu He, alongside the governor of China's central bank, Yi Gang. The two-day talks come as Washington and Beijing agreed to a 3-month ceasefire in December. At the G20 summit in Argentina, the Trump administration suspended its plan to increase tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese imports to 25% from the current 10%. The hope was that it would give negotiators enough time to settle the trade spat that has triggered fears of a global economic slowdown. President Trump has expressed his own optimism about reaching a deal and even suggested this week that he might be open to postponing the current deadline so both sides can reach an agreement. Diplomatic sources say Trump may sit down with Chinese President Xi Jinping sometime in March once an agreement is sealed. President Xi is expected to meet with the U.S. delegation in Beijing on Friday as they hope to shake hands on a deal as quickly as possible. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The United States has imposed new sanctions on 9 Iranian citizens and 2 entities that it says are engaged in malicious, covert actions against Americans. For more on this story and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Noah Aram. So Aram, tell us more.
Well, Mark, the sanctions were announced by Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin on Wednesday. The targeted entities include the New Horizon organization, which the Treasury Department says hosts international conferences aimed at recruiting and collecting intelligence from foreign attendees. The other is the Net Payguard Samavat company. They are both accused of helping Tehran spy on Americans, both at home and abroad, through cyber attacks and other covert operations. 9 individuals linked to the organizations were also sanctioned. U.S. prosecutors have also charged a former U.S. Air Force officer who had high-level security clearance with collaborating with Iran's military to spy on her former American colleagues. Monica Elfried Witt defected to Iran 6 years ago and is thought to have supplied classified information about U.S. spy techniques and the people who took part in them to the Iranian government. She was reported to have been recruited for the operation after attending 2 conferences in Iran organized by New Horizon. Washington says Net Payguard used that information supplied by Witt to launch a cyber campaign in 2014 that tracked the activities of her former colleagues. Witt remains at large and was last seen in Southwest Asia in July 2013. Despite the global progress in tackling unemployment, the International Labour Organization says the general quality of jobs is getting worse. In its annual report released on Wednesday, the organization said global unemployment fell by 2 million to 172 million in 2018. While numbers are expected to improve this year, the quality of jobs deteriorated last year, with 61% of the global workforce in informal employment, typically vulnerable jobs with low pay and no social protection. The number of asylum applications in EU countries continues to drop, with last year's figure falling to near pre-crisis levels. A report by the European Asylum Support Office shows just under 635,000 asylum applications were recorded in EU nations in 2018, a 10% drop from the year before. It also marks the 3rd straight year for the number to drop. While overall applications continued to fall last year, citizens from Iran, Turkey and several visa-liberalized countries lodged more applications than in 2017.
Thank you as always to our Noah Aram for the world news there. Now back here in South Korea, the Blue House government and ruling party have agreed to decentralize the country's police force, transferring more duties to local police units. The three groups agreed on Thursday to expand the system to 5 cities and provinces this year and nationwide by 2021. Currently, the system, which transfers some duties to police units under the control of local governments, has only been test operated on Jeju Island. They seek to allocate more practical duties, such as those that are related to sexual and school violence, as well as regional traffic accidents, to local police units, and allow the national police to be in charge of broader national issues. They vowed to cooperate to legislate the bill and proceed with its implementation as soon as possible. President Moon Jae-in was in Korea's southeastern city of Busan on Wednesday. While there, he pledged efforts to redevelop the country's second biggest city. He also stressed the significance of leading the move towards so-called smart cities in order to boost innovative growth. Hwang Ho-jun with the details.
High-tech street lamps that provide location-based safety services, park benches that feature smartphone charging services using solar power, crosswalks that display the walk signal when a pedestrian is crossing. According to President Moon Jae-in, smart cities will change the paradigm of everyday life.
스마트 시티는 4차 산업혁명의 요람입니다. 우리가 새롭게 만들어가야 할 미래 도시의 모습이며 우리의 삶을 더 안전하고 풍요롭게 꾸려줄 터전입니다.
And while the concept intends to create a safer, more efficient, and future-oriented city for the people, President Moon stressed it is also a platform for innovative growth of the nation. Such remarks came during a special ceremony held in Busan to unveil the government plans to build 2 new smart cities in both the port city and in Sejong. He said the government will spend about $3.3 billion to build the nation's first smart city in Busan by 2021, a city that connects traffic, safety, disaster prevention, administration, and medical care services in an organic and efficient way via South Korea's advanced information and communication network. The president also said the government is currently pushing to introduce a regulatory sandbox specifically tailored for building smart cities. Once the construction of the 2 testbed cities is successfully completed, President Moon said the government will seek to export the smart city concept as well.
우리의 가능성과 역량은 충분합니다. 부산과 세종이 세계 최고의 스마트 시티로 성공하면 대한민국 경제는 선도형 경제로 일어날 수 있습니다.
Alongside expressing his determination and confidence that the nation's power to lead the world's smart cities will begin in Busan, President Moon also pledged support for revitalizing South Korea's second-largest city. Busan's facelift will include 15 renewal projects to redevelop various parts of the city, making it more connected and more innovative, while also promoting balanced regional development. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
Nuclear scientists here in South Korea have conducted a revolutionary experiment creating what they're calling an artificial sun, taking a huge step towards developing clean nuclear energy. The National Fusion Research Institute says its fusion reactor managed to sustain a temperature of more than 100 million degrees Celsius for 1.5 seconds. It's the first time in the world that the temperature, around 6 to 7 times hotter than the actual sun, was sustained for longer than 1 second. This comes as scientists around the world are looking to develop nuclear fusion devices that could mass produce clean power, replicating the natural process that the sun uses to generate energy. South Korea is aiming to give its fishing industry a fresh lease of life. The government has devised a 10-year action plan to counter the declining young people entering the industry and also to make the sector as a whole much more sustainable going forward. Oh Soo-young reports.
The Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries announced a plan Wednesday to turn South Korea's ailing fishing sector into an $89 billion industry by the year 2030. Finalised at a ministerial meeting, the plan is a response to a decline in the number of people working in fishing and the sector's growing shortage of young people in particular. The goal of the 10-year roadmap is to boost livelihoods and create 40,000 new jobs by building prosperous fishing communities. This involves a drive to renovate some 80 ports and harbours in the country starting this year, and by 2022 to modernise 300 fishing towns and ports. The Trade and Science Ministries will also join in to develop technologies that can increase fisheries production in a smart and eco-friendly way. A management system for coastal fishing will also be established, as will more effective ways to prevent the overfishing of certain species and illegal fishing. By creating a sustainable flow of production and consumption, the government will also nurture 100 local companies with the aim of creating some $3.4 billion worth of fisheries exports. With the plan, the government hopes to raise the industry's total annual revenue from the $59 billion recorded in 2016 to $89 billion by 2030. Seoul, Arirang News.
Now, South Korean star striker Son Heungmin has bagged yet another goal, this time in the Champions League knockout stage against German side Borussia Dortmund. The Tottenham Hotspur forward broke the deadlock just after the start of the second half, scoring his 16th goal of the season. Son has been known for being a thorn in the side of the Bundesliga champions. In his previous 10 games against Dortmund, Son has bagged 8 goals and been on the winning side 6 times. With the latest goal, Son has scored in 4 matches in a row for the London club, dashing fears that he might suffer from a burnout following his commitment in 3 international tournaments over the past 8 months alone.
Good morning. It was colder earlier, but highs will rise rapidly, so there should be a gap of nearly 10 degrees Celsius between the lows and highs today. But it will be colder than the seasonal average going into the weekend. So temperature fluctuations and dryness in the air can lead to many coming down with colds and flu. Take good care of your health. We are in the last stage of winter. Meanwhile, parts of Gangwon province are free from dryness as snow has been falling in some areas, and expect to see 1 to 7 centimeters of snow fall until the afternoon. The rest of the country will be under lots of clouds though, and daily highs will range from 4 to 9 degrees Celsius, Seoul getting up to 4 degrees this afternoon. And if you plan on going on a date tonight to celebrate Valentine's Day, the weather should be nice enough. A light mix of rain and snow is in the forecast for Friday evening in most parts of the country. And next Tuesday, while temperatures will become more bearable next week. That's Korea for you, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all the news we have for now on this Thursday morning here in Seoul. Don't forget, you can check out our website to catch up on more of the latest. Just go to arirang.com/news. Stay tuned to Arirang TV, though. Plenty more coming up, including our next newscast at noon Korea time with our very own Lee Ji-yoon. So until then, goodbye.
During the Japanese invasion of Korea, the Imjin War, Japanese soldiers caught a tiger and put 3 Jindo dogs praise for tigers. The following day, the tiger was dead and the Jindo dogs were alive. And there is another story. A Jindo dog which was sold to Daejeon cut off his leash and returned to Jindo to meet his owner, running 300 kilometers for 7 months. Jindo dogs are known as loyal and brave dogs. Korea's representative breed, Jindo dog, originated on Jindo Island, is now recognized as the national breed of Korea.